Hi guys, welcome to this quick video on how to attack an essay question. This is going to be specifically helpful for the questions on learning, but it's the same process that you'll be going through when you get to the text response analysis for general style embed as well. So this is from the essay writing guide that we have given out to you. And essentially, it shows you what you need to be doing when you're going to be attacking a new question. So here are the 8 different steps that you can do to break down this question, to really understand what it's asking you and make sure that you're going to be answering the question well and making sure that you're using that planning time really, really effectively to set yourself up to generate a really good response. So you need to read the question carefully, you need to identify keywords, break down the question, you need to pull apart the topic, work out what kind of question it is, and then brainstorm your ideas and start to write your essay. Excuse me. Here's a question from the set of questions that we've been giving you as practice. And I thought I would show you actually how we would do that. So the first step is going to ask you to read the question carefully to try and understand what it is actually asking you to do. So let's have a look. So it's saying, discuss the ways learning encourages readers to critically reflect on the world in which we live. The thing we need to do is try and break down the topic and work out what content it's actually asking us to incorporate into this. So what is it that it's actually asking us to engage with? So we're supposed to underline these. So the ways that learning encourages readers, that's a pretty important point. What he's actually asking them to do to critically reflect. And then this last part is pretty important as well. So I find this important because it's asking who, what, and where. This is to do with context. Right, okay. So I'm sure that you can already start to see that this is the important sorts of parts of the question. It's asking us who, what, and where to consider in this question. What we're going to do is try and circle the words that we need to find synonyms for. So these are the words that we're going to be using often. And to avoid expression that's repetitive, we need to find other ways of saying it. So here are some words that I think we need to find other words for or phrases for. And then also the world in which we live. Just imagine that whole phrase was circled. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video now. You don't need to see me writing all of this. But essentially I'm going to pull these apart and work out what synonyms we can work on to actually incorporate into our response. It's really important to go through this because if you don't think about these language choices before you start writing, you will end up making a really repetitious argument. If you think about what other ways to express before you start writing, then you're going to use these alternative words from the get-go. It's going to make sure that when you get to the end of your essay writing time, if you don't have time to edit, you know that you've used good expression throughout. So I'm going to pause it here and then magically you'll see in a few seconds all the words that we've decided on. Okay, so here's a whole bunch of different ways that we can explain these same ideas. So these are a whole bunch of synonyms that we can use to put instead of the words that are in the original question. So for encourages, we've got implores, we've got urges, we've got promotes. So these are all ways that Lunig is actually engaging with his readers. For readers, I think that we can talk about them as being an audience. Okay, it's a little bit difficult to talk about them in more than that way, but that's at least a start. For critically reflect, there's 2 things going on here. So there's critical and then also that idea of reflection. I've had a couple of ideas for a couple of those words that we can use. So critically reflect could be summed up by question. So he encourages his readers to question or to challenge. Or I've got thoughtfully meditate there as well, which is possibly another way that we can say it. With some of those words, we might need to add some other words to make it a phrase, to make it a direct sort of swap out for the words in the question. Down here, what I've done is I've actually looked at the world in which we live. I said that it was to do with context, and there's 4 different types of context we could talk about. So political, social, cultural, and historical. But the way that we'd be able to talk about it would be current society and specifically Australia. But you might want to think about how these two things talk to each other. So the Australian social context, or the Australian political context, or the Australian cultural context, or current society from a historical point of view. So there's a few ways that we can do that. Now, some people will encourage you to rewrite the question using these, but I think that if you're being really thoughtful about the words that you're finding synonyms for, it's going to make that process really easy, and it's going to save you a bit of time as well, because we could actually just rephrase this question using some of these synonyms. So discuss the ways that Lunik implores his audience to question or thoughtfully question the current Australian society. Okay, so there's some ideas there that we can work with. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of language choices that we've made here that we can continue to think about as we're going through pulling this question apart. So the next bit is we're going to actually need to work out what kind of question it is, what it's trying to ask us to do. So, for instance, we've got the word discuss there at the front. Discuss obviously means that we need to show both sides. And as we keep saying in class, we're looking at the grey areas. So we're looking at how can we answer this question by looking at the grey parts of it. So it's not just accepting this question, but challenging the question and trying to find answers in that question that sort of show a thoughtful engagement with the question. The next bit that we need to have a look at is this part that says the ways. So as we've been trying to work out in class, we've been talking about the ways that Lunik actually structures his writing, how he's actually constructed his ideas. So we are looking at construction there. So we might be thinking about so literary devices. Sorry, the handwriting with this pen is not the best. We might be thinking about structure as well. Okay. Now the next step is to start thinking about brainstorming for evidence. So this last bit that we've just done, the finding out how we can discuss, but how we can discuss the construction of the text to answer the rest of the question, is where we need to start thinking about evidence. So evidence is obviously going to come from the text. We're looking at quotes here. Otherwise, we're looking at really good paraphrasing, but of course, we're encouraging you to think about quotes. Once we have the evidence, then we can start thinking about a plan. It'd be good to plan your ideas, the ideas that you're going to discuss in your body paragraphs, and work out what order they might go in. Let's say we've got 4 ideas. Got 4 ideas. It's really, really important that we have those ideas first, because if we plan what we're going to be saying in those, what we're going to be analysing, it's going to make the introduction writing really easy. Okay. Now, I know that this looks like a bit of a mess, especially if you sort of, if you haven't watched the whole video, I encourage you not to skip through it, because you need to understand the steps that we go through to come up with this. The more practice that you have with this, the less messy our thinking will look, the more that these processes get internalized, and the more that you'll be able to do it in your head, and the quicker you'll be able to do it as well. The things that I would encourage you to do to make sure that you can do this efficiently and effectively in SAT conditions is to make sure that you're using a dictionary. In practice, it might be worth having a look at using a thesaurus as well, especially when we're trying to come up with synonyms for words. But as I've been saying in class, we need to make sure that we are using our planning time effectively to pull this apart. But the more often we do this, the better practice we get at it, and the easier it is to find not only ways of being able to answer this question, but ways that other questions we've answered will help us answer this one as well. All right, good luck.